The frightening observation is that if you look back at the history of the last 1,000 or so years, we've had a major pandemic every 100 or so years. We've had a major depression every 100 or so years. We've had major wars every 100 or so years. I'm just a bit worried that, which is exactly the time it takes for a generation to forget and the next generation to come along and rediscover those lessons from last time. I'm just worried that we're going to have to rediscover the same lessons that we learned 100 or so years ago with the two world wars, the Great Depression, and the change that happened again.
Yeah. I think you're right. I mean, I talked about people in the United States coming to see politics not as a sacred space where people who with very different backgrounds come to negotiate common approaches, but as a form of entertainment, kind of like a boxing match. And you just vote for somebody who's going to stick it to the man and drain the swamp. When the swamp is us in a democracy, the government is us. That's why I called it an autoimmune disease. And globally, the United States, has definitely been imperfect. But it's not that really a lot of countries have stepped up. There have been a lot of free riders, and the United States has carried this burden and benefit on its shoulders for a long time. And as someone who really believes in this country, and our United States and Australia, I mean, we are historically joined. Those Marines in Guadalcanal, they were fighting for us, but all of Australia is different because of what happened there, because of the Americans and Australians and others fighting together. And we can't lose this battle. And America is down, but we're not out. We still stand for something. We still have a lot of idealism here. We have an election coming up. I sound like a partisan here, but I have lots of friends who are Republicans who believe in this country and what we stand for and the international system and our allies and friends and doing the right thing, and that we shouldn't inject Lysol into ourselves. There is that America is not dead, but we've all got to come together on every level.
Well, appropriately enough, yesterday, of course, was Anzac Day, the day that Australia remembers its role it's played in trying to push the right values and make the world a more peaceful, ultimately, place. So it is the right moment to be thinking of all these big, important questions. I want to just broaden the conversation to genetic engineering and the promise and hope and the perils that poses for the final 10 minutes of our conversation. Supposing we fix the world order, we fix the institutions so that we can deal with these challenges like pandemics and all the other existential risks that face the world. One of the risks there is that, and we've already seen this beginning November last year, is that maybe China's just going to completely win the genetic engineering race. We've already seen CRISPR modified babies in China, and they have a number of reasons in terms of data, in terms of attitudes to privacy, in terms of ethics, that means that they may go down that road quicker, faster, more dangerously even than we would here in the West. So will China just completely win this race and use that for economic and other advantage?
It could. And there's a tendency for liberal people to say, well, science is always a win-win, that science that happens anywhere is science that happens everywhere. And sometimes that is true. And there are some times when science is a zero sum. It's not coincidental that America has all these big internet behemoth companies and Amazon and Google. And it's because the internet was invented here and our companies had a head start. And so there is a zero-sum element to technology. I mean, that's America's post-war wealth comes from these heroes like Vannevar Bush, who helped build this science and technology juggernaut that was a foundation of American wealth and power. And we don't know the answer to that question, but certainly China's government sees scientific leadership as a key to its goal to be the leading global power by 2049. So that's the race that they're on. That's what the 1,000 talents are about. That's frankly why we see so much risk-taking in the Chinese scientific community, because the message they're getting from Beijing is that science is the way to put China where the Chinese government believes that it needs to be. You mentioned data. So right now we have 3 models of data privacy. There's China, minimal data privacy; Europe, lots of data privacy; the United States, somewhere in the middle. There will be an answer about what's the best way to do data to advance science. It could be that if you have weakest privacy protections, the data is the most accessible, and then you get a head start. It could be if you have the strongest privacy protections, people trust the data, and you get higher quality data, which is why, for example, the UK Biobank is the best genetic database in the world, even though there are other countries that have bigger ones. Or it could be that this US position, for now, somewhere in the middle, is optimal. The way that we're going to find out is 20 years from now, we're going to see where these world-leading companies are, that what scientists have the greatest access and are making the biggest advances. And the same is true for scientific cultures and all of those things. So China absolutely sees science as part and parcel of its national strategic plan around the Chinese dream and Chinese Renaissance as they see it. That doesn't mean we all have to see science in that way. I think it's great that we see science as a new frontier, as a way to enhance our capabilities and improve our health and make our lives better. But if there's at a moment like this, we really need to ask the tough questions about what's the kind of science that we want. And because, as you know, I believe what we're experiencing now is a manifestation of China's race, China's science race, where it doesn't have the infrastructure. And it's actually my view, and I can't prove it, that China was actually in a very well-intentioned way trying to develop vaccines and preventions for these exact viruses if they had this mistake in Wuhan and the leak. And I put all the evidence on my jamiemetzl.com website, and people can go there and decide for themselves. But science is the domain. We're at a moment where we're seeing exponential scientific advance. We're seeing a super convergence of all of these technologies. And so our lives are just fundamentally changing, and the rate of this change is only going to pick up.